Hello, everybody. It's Natalia Marin, and welcome to this episode of Does It Work? A show where I, your lovely host, will evaluate if cultural phenomenons, government systems, psychological theories actually work. So, in future episodes, we'll look at things like the Electoral College, manifesting, journaling, so much more. But today, our episode surrounds the placebo effect. Okay, so before I dive right in, thank you so much for listening. I hope your morning is going smoothly and everything's happening the way you want it to happen. And I hope you guys have a great day. So let's lock in and let's hear about the placebo effect. So let's start with a definition. The placebo effect is a fascinating phenomenon that occurs when a sham medical intervention causes improvement in a patient's condition because of the factors associated with the patient's perception of the intervention. Examples include placebo interventions, include sugar pills, saline injections, and therapeutic rituals. So I think that the placebo effect is kind of like a lot of people know what it is. So I'm not going to go too far in depth, but it's basically almost like when you do a test, a scientific test, and somebody gets the drug that's like they're testing, and then the other person gets a sugar pill. So it's something that one of the groups of the study is not being tested on, but it's the placebo effect. So even though the people that get the sugar pill, they still get the improvements that the regular pills would have had. So not all, as it says, also remember all of these sources are actually from real reputable sources, and they'll be linked on my YouTube channel. I felt like that was a better way to do it in the description. But if you want to follow the show on Instagram, make sure to follow Does It Work Show on Instagram, and the YouTube channel is just Does It Work Show as well. So you can see all the facts and all the sources from credible information listed there. So let's get more farther into it. So the National Library of Medicine says that not all results of the placebo are beneficial. As such, placebos can also result in undesirable outcomes. Indeed, the term is nocebo effect. It's coming from Latin nocere. Maybe that's Latin. Sorry to Latin teachers out there. But nocere meaning harm. So it's commonly used when a placebo has an unfavorable outcome. So the MedSafe actually says that it's when a patient experiences negative symptoms or side effects from a treatment or substance due to their belief that they will occur. So the placebo effect is not always great, and so it sometimes produces this nocebo effect. But let's dive further into the facts in our evaluation of if the placebo effect works. So there definitely are some challenges with the placebo effect, and I have to say that I did not, when I went into this research, I kind of was going in with the knowledge that like, oh, of course the placebo effect works. And like, I personally used it before. I know my family has used it before with my sister when she was younger. This is kind of a funny story where my sister, when she was younger, she couldn't really sleep very well. And then they went to the doctor and they gave her sugar pills. And so now she can sleep. Obviously, my sister's old now, but just a placebo effect, and now it worked and she was sleeping. So even I have personal experience with the placebo effect works. I did not know that there was challenges to this, and so obviously research will expose all of the challenges and everything. So let's get into it. So another article from the National Library of Medicine says that it is challenging for medical professionals to sidestep the placebo effect, only to measure intrinsic activity of the tested treatment. So therefore, therapeutic evaluations become difficult in mental conditions sensitive to the placebo effect. And this complicates studies of the placebo effect, and physicians must separate it from the treatment, and it is challenging because there's a certain degree of deception. Obviously, I think that's the main thing of the placebo effect is like you're deceiving someone that you're receiving actual treatment. So psychologically, then it kind of makes sense because then you're like, oh, I'm receiving treatment, so therefore I should be getting better or whatever the treatment's supposed to do. They also go on to say that translating the knowledge of the placebo effect to benefit the patient requires thorough evaluation of clinical effectiveness of the intended effect. Therefore, attempts to generate the beneficial placebo response should only be made under strict professional, legal, and ethical norms after obtaining appropriate informed consent. Again, with the scientific studies, a lot of it that is kind of maybe challenging about the placebo effect is that there is a level of deception. And that's not meaning that it doesn't work, but there is that level. And so then it's kind of a question of, do you do it ethically, and like kind of all the things that go into that as well. So I found this super, super interesting article. And I'm not one for reading long scientific articles. I'm not a STEM girl at all. I'm purely journalism and purely kind of humanities focused. But this article was so interesting. So it's called The Myth of the Placebo Response, and it's by Wayne B. Jonas. And so he says that, actually, let's go into the history of the placebo effect. I think that that's an interesting place to start, because he explains kind of why we're here with the placebo effect and kind of maybe modern science and health solutions as we know it. So it says, he said that, so starting out, in most ancient healing rituals, it was the mind, the heart, and the body, nature, all considered one, and health comes from getting them to work in like a harmonious tradition. So then approximately 150 years ago, some things were discovered in the Western Hemisphere, and that radically changed the thinking of the Western Hemisphere. And this article was written, hold on, let me look when this was written. This was written in 2019, just so we know. So approximately 150 years ago, some things were discovered in the Western Hemisphere about the small in particular that radically changed this thinking. So the microscope and chemistry were invented and studied, and they began to identify and isolate the bugs and drugs that were the cures and causes of disease. So there was no more of this ancient healing rituals, and it all transitioned to Western medicine and started looking for drugs. Okay. And then the thing that happened, of course, is that disease does not disappear. It only becomes more like chronic conditions because, sorry, my cable's all messed up right now. Okay. That was for the video listeners, honestly. You can see me struggling with the cable. Okay, so again, so the disease does not disappear, as we know now, because there is definitely disease in our modern era, but it makes another issue because the aging population starts developing chronic disease, which is the main causes of mortality. And so then the vast majority of these drugs fail. And when ultimately tested in large studies compared to placebo treatments, they are lackluster. So they're not doing better than the placebo treatments are. And we'll talk about an article a little bit later, but the FDA requires that if you're in a study, that the drug, obviously, has to be performing better than the placebo effect. And that's very good, right? Like, wouldn't you think? And just thinking about it, of course, we want the drug to perform better than the placebo effect. But if you get into it, then you realize that billions of dollars are being made when it is proven in the FDA and the drug companies and manufacturers, is that they're just proving a minuscule scale that is better than the placebo effect. And so that's when it starts to get that it's a little bit complicated because it has to be better than the placebo effect. And believe me, like if I'm taking a drug, it better be better than a sugar pill that someone else is providing. I 100% agree with that. But then it becomes how much better? It just has to be better. So is it better by 0.1%, better by 10%, better by 50%? And it doesn't matter as long as it's better. Obviously, there's a ton of other FDA guidelines. We're not trying to harp on the FDA, but that's also a thing that you need to think about when talking about the placebo effect and kind of its challenges of the term and of the kind of identity of it as a all. So going back to this article, it says that it's talking about reductionism, which is basically just trying to simplify it as far as you can. It's kind of what that means. So it has largely failed for chronic illnesses, yet in Western medicine, it is heavily invested in it, both in a mindset and money. Healthcare has invented a way of solidifying its legitimacy further, thus invented the placebo response. So then let's go to this example that kind of helped me a little bit. It's about statins for hearts. So let's say it says in this article, for every 100 people who take a statin for the primary prevention of heart disease, only 2 will avoid a heart attack by doing this. 98 of the 100 people will derive no benefits at all from this. So it will only prevent 2 people from a heart attack, but 5 to 20 will suffer significant side effects. So to get these small benefits, many must tolerate these side effects and the costs that come with it. So who determines whether this benefit is better than its harms? So that's not a scientific question. It's a value question that each patient and each their physician must make for themselves, as this article states. But unfortunately, physicians are harmed almost completely with tools that the industry provides them. So rarely it's a decision about a statin used offer in full context about the benefits and the cost of alternative approaches, such as behavior or ritual of compliance, kind of that social and emotional factors like loneliness. All the other things can go into heart disease as well, but they just will prescribe a statin. And so this is kind of treated in that regard that it's only slightly better than the placebo effect, right? Because it's only, it says, this is a real fact, that only 98% or 98 out of 100 people will not derive any benefit from this statin. I thought that was crazy. So this person suggests that this medical professional, not just a person, suggests that by abandoning the concept of the placebo response, we as doctors and physicians could bring into focus how our mind and expectations alter our biology and how the cultural rituals, environment, all of that stuff will induce maximum healing rather than just defaulting to debates whether the treatment is effective. The treatment effect is real, in quotations, or just placebo, based only on whether it works through a specific theory or a small molecule. So legitimate medical treatments have become defined as if it produces more than a placebo response. This is exactly what I'm trying to talk about with the whole FDA guidelines. So an entire pharmaceutical industry and its regulators attempt to control and profit by providing the small molecules produced to a clinical effect greater than a placebo response. So it just has to be greater. Doesn't say by how much. So this person says that they think that they should stop using the term placebo response and call it instead a meaning response in its special application in medicine, which is calling a healing response. So that's obviously maybe not the standard of what we think of when we think of the placebo effect, and that's more in a scientific context, but I thought that was important to provide because I can guarantee I did not know this before I started researching, and maybe someone out there also did not know this, that obviously the placebo effect and the placebo response, as they say, is a thing that we can experience every day on a minuscule scale. So like, let's say we're taking a sugar pill to help us sleep or something like that. But it also has greater scientific background and understanding, and the history of it comes from science, actual science, that tries to help get drugs and therapies and treatments to everyone that's sick or in need of this kind of stuff. So let's go into how the placebo effect works. So we discussed some of the challenges of the effect in itself. So let's talk about it. So Harvard Health, which I thought was really funny when I was researching this. Maybe some professor at Harvard was really, really interested in the placebo effect because there's about like 10 to 15 articles just from Harvard talking about the placebo effect. That's such a side note, but I just thought that was kind of funny. So it's called the power of the placebo effect. So how the placebo works is still not quite understood, but it involves a complex neurobiological, reaction that includes everything from increases in feel-good neurotransmitters, I'm not making this up, this is Harvard actually, like endorphins or dopamine, to a greater activity in the certain brain regions linked to mood, emotion, reactions, and self-awareness. So this is how they explain it. So placebos won't, let's say, lower your cholesterol or shrink a tumor, but they work on symptoms modulated by the brain, like a perception of pain. So placebos may make you feel better, but they won't cure you. So if we're talking about trying to cure you, no, they're not gonna cure you. You need to go to modern medicine and get cured that way. But they have been shown to be most effective in conditions for pain management, stress-related insomnia, and cancer treatments side effects, not cancer treatments, the side effects of cancer treatments like fatigue and nausea and that. So then they again talk about how the FDA requires that the placebo effect has to be less effective than the real drug. So yes, remember, we already talked about that. So the thing is with the placebo effect that becomes a little bit, even from this how it works, because it does work, comes from that it becomes complicated when people will rely solely on this. And if you listen to last episode about astrology, very, very different. Very different types of things, obviously. One's very scientific. The other one is not. Go listen to that episode. It was very fun. But if you rely solely on the placebo effect to cure you of your things that have very deep and underlying causes, that's not going to work. The placebo effect is to help maybe emotional needs. And so we can go into something that I thought was very, very interesting. So there's many, many cases of the placebo effect working. Some pretty incredible cases and some that are just kind of like astounding. But I thought it would be more effective and more important if we talk about something that is actually way more practical. So for treating depression, and this article that is from Michigan Medicine, the University of Michigan Medicine Center, talked about depression. And so it's prior to COVID-19 pandemic, 1 in 12 adults had a diagnosis of depression. During the pandemic, it rose to 1 in 3 adults. And that means a sharp rise to help explain why the U.S. spent $26.25 billion worth of antidepressant medications, and they were used across the globe in 2020. So this is really interesting. So brain imaging studies show that the brain has an identifiable response to the expectations and context that comes with placebos. So according to psychologist and placebo expert Irving Kirsch, who has studied the placebo effect for decades, and it's a large part of what makes antidepressants helpful in alleviating depression is the placebo effect. So in other words, the belief that the medication will be beneficial will help people who are suffering from depression kind of feel better. So depression's not the only condition for which medical treatments actually are functioning at the level of placebo. And obviously antidepressants work work for some people in that regard to actually help and regulate emotions, but also the placebo effect plays a really big part in that, of believing that you'll get better and then you get better because of that, you know? And so many clinicians offer treatment that appear to work based on the fact that patients get better. But a recent study reported that only 1 in 10 of the medical treatments sampled meet the standards of what is considered by some to be the gold standard of high-quality evidence, according to a grading system by an international nonprofit organization. So this means that many patients improve even though the treatments they have received have not actually been proved to be better than the placebo. Okay, so we're going back to that whole thing. So it's really helpful, and this is not the only article that talks about it. You can find articles everywhere that's talking about how the placebo effect actually really, really helps in treating depression, and kind of the thinking that you'll get better by taking the antidepressants actually makes you better. And so the same thing, going back to the Harvard Health article, another article, of course, because they wrote so many, that says that placebos won't work for every medical situation. For example, like they can't lower cholesterol, like I said, they can't cure cancer. But they really, really help for self-observation, as they say, symptoms like pain, nausea, fatigue, all of that stuff. It really, really helps. And here are some other really interesting facts, let's say, about the placebo effect and how it's just kind of interesting. So there's a study that finds that a knee surgery is no better than the placebo effect. So it's obviously, I'm not trying to discredit medicine. I hope no one thinks that. I'm not trying to discredit medicine at all. But patients with osteoarthritis of the knee who underwent a placebo arthroscopic surgery, just a surgery, guys, were just as likely to report that pain relief like that they had pain relief, as those who received the real procedure, according to the Department of Veterans Affairs and Baylor College of Medicine in a study published. And so this can even have like greater effects, guys. So if you take like a fake surgery, I guess, then like the placebo effect can work. That's what I was talking about, that it has more extreme and amazing things, but it also works, I mean, like for practical reasons, like treating depression. That's so common. So it also works in that regard. Of course, there's also a really, really interesting article that talks about that even if you know that you're getting a placebo effect, that like you're receiving the placebo, it still will help. Let me find this article very quickly because I don't have it linked, but it will basically talk about how that even if you're let me find the article because it's very important that I get this article right. But yeah, so it's just talking about that even if you don't know that the placebo is working, that you can also you can get the effects from it. And even if you think it's a placebo, you can still kind of, it goes about actually into that whole like mental sphere, right? So if you think that you're getting better and you convince yourself that you're getting better, it still works. And there's obviously a ton of other things that go into it, but let's go into my opinion. So I don't think there's any doubt that the placebo effect works. I really do think that the placebo effect works. And there's a context in which that I think that in this science, I was going to say the science industry, that's not what I meant. The scientific kind of studies and fields where this kind of the terminology, I think, almost of the placebo effect can lead to more harm than good in some circumstances, because you're talking about, again, about how the FDA requires you to be better than the placebo effect, which is great, but how much? It doesn't have a specific requirement, and so that leads to a lot of drug companies and all that stuff just making it barely better. And then also it go into the same thing where there's the nocebo effect, like I was talking about earlier, where you actually kind of convince yourself into, like, let's say I'm taking, I don't know, an antidepressant, let's say that. And then there's a symptom that is also that you have really trouble sleeping. And if you're taking the placebo, it would be the nocebo effect, or even if you're taking a sugar pill instead of, let's say, the antidepressant, you will also have trouble sleeping because you know that that's a symptom. So that's another issue with the placebo effect. And it's the same thing that I think is going to be a running kind of thing in all of these episodes. If you use anything to guide your life, like that, this is a basis of your life, and you won't seek actual treatment for your issues and go to reliable and credible doctors and physicians to treat your illnesses and solely rely that a sugar pill is going to get you there, then it's not going to work, because it's the placebo effect. You're taking a sugar pill. At the end of the day, it would be you're taking something that has nothing in it to affect you. So if you're doing it on like a wide scale of trying to cure your illnesses with it or doing anything like that, it's not going to work. It's not. It's because it's not scientific in that regard. It's nothing more than just, I don't know, taking a spoonful of honey. But if you are using it in like the antidepressant context or in something that your physician is prescribing to you, that's very, very beneficial. And also just on a lower scale, if you need help to sleep and you're taking a placebo and like you know it's a placebo, but it's supposed to help you sleep and you sleep better, that's great if you don't have any underlying conditions. Just you can't have something rule your entire life is basically the issue with all of this. So at the end of the day, the final conclusion is that there's no doubt that it works. It 100% works. But again, if you're in trouble with your physical illness or anything like that, you need to see a doctor. The placebo effect is not going to do much for you. And there's challenges that come with the placebo effect that I didn't even know before I started researching this in the medical community and with drug companies and drug manufacturers as well. So it does work, but there's an asterisk there. So make sure the next time you're using the placebo effect, you know about the asterisk. So we've reached the final segment of our show, What Works for Me. So it's my unscientific, unresearched thing that has been working for me recently. So a thing that I've been doing recently is taking a picture every day of something good that happened. So there's a lot of good things that happen. I have a very lovely, happy filled life and for it. But if you just remember, like, I don't know, the other day I took a picture of like a croissant I had. If you know anything about me, I'm obsessed and love croissants so much. So that was really happy. And like then I can look back and see, on September 14th, I was eating a croissant, and like that was a really good thing that happened that day. It's just to remind yourself of the good things that are happening in life and to be grateful for those things as well. But yeah, so we reached the end of our episode. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to follow me on Instagram at @NataliaMarin_ and the show on Instagram at Does It Work Show. All this episode and all the episodes will be on YouTube later, so you can watch them a million other times and get up to hundreds of billions of views for me. Just kidding. But just in case you miss an episode, they will be on YouTube on Does It Work Show. You can just look it up. And again, I'll provide all the links where I use there in the description. So thank you so much again, and I'll see you next time. But update. So if you want to keep listening for the next 30 minutes, I will be on the DJ shift. So I'll be here playing music, probably talking about my life, my show, all the things that go into that. So keep listening till 10 Arizona time to listen to hear the music that I like, the music that I'm playing, just so you know. And I will see y'all next time. Thank you so much for listening. I hope y'all have an amazing day, and goodbye for now.